me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. 'Cause it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
After 2 outs, Flood is up, with Maxwell still on third. Ron Board pitches, Curt lines a single to center, and Maxwell scores the game's first run.
In modern-day sports, it is common to see huge salaries attached to athletes. Many wonder why so much money is given to players and how such players have overarching influence with team managers. Few know that it is in fact the actions of Curt Flood that forever changed American sports by increasing players' rights. Curt Flood was a professional baseball player for the St. Louis Cardinals from 1961 to 1969 and the Washington Senators in 1971. Since his youth, Flood had a passion for the sport of baseball. He grew up in a city of crime, but managed to avoid getting lost in the shuffle by committing himself to baseball. Since he was African American and relatively small, scouts told him not to invest too much of his life into the game because the chances of getting signed by a professional organization were slim. Even so, Flood was accepted to the Cincinnati organization in 1956, a minor league team. There he faced extreme prejudice because of his skin color. Nevertheless, he excelled in this organization with a .340 batting average and 29 home runs. In 1957, Flood was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals. Here, Flood showed his excellence in the sport and served as the team captain during a period in which they won 3 pennants and a World Series title.
From victory, Gibson makes a supreme effort and Scott strikes out. The Cardinals win. They're the new world champions. And Bob Gibson, with his 3rd victory, has brought them through in the decisive 7th game, even as he did in 1964 against the New York Yankees. It was another spectacular series, with the Red Sox fighting their way back after being down 3 games to 1, with records shattered and glittering heroes on both sides to underline once again that for sheer drama and thrills, the World Series is unmatched anywhere on the sports scene.
During his career, he won 7 Gold Glove awards, and in 1968, Sports Illustrated magazine named Flood the best center fielder in baseball. However, off the field, Flood was influenced by his friends Johnny and Marion Jorgensen, who were political activists. They gave Flood the spirit to fight for his beliefs through effective protest. This political involvement was not favorable to the ideas of the Cardinal hierarchy. Later, when Flood requested a higher salary from the Cardinals, many administrative problems were ignited. This caused Cardinals owner August Busch to reprimand Flood by giving him stern talks about the idea that baseball is about the fans as opposed to the money. Flood felt that these talks, along with the rigid plantation-like structure of the team, limited players' mobility and freedom.
You're a man who makes $90,000 a year, which isn't exactly slave wages. What's your retort to that?
A well-paid slave is nonetheless a slave.
Flood's political activism gave him the confidence to fight these issues with strong protest.
I rode to the ballpark with him every day. And one day, his parking place wasn't there. The bat order, usually when you order bats, lickety-split, them bats are there. And all of a sudden, Curt didn't have his bats.
His life is starting to fray.
He said, they're gonna get rid of me. I said, no, they can't get rid of you. He would say that just about every other night. He said, they don't get rid of me.
The articles in the newspapers were very, very powerful. Even Harry Carey was saying, "Oh, wouldn't it be great to see Dick Allen in this lineup? Where'd that come from?"
They were only rumors, but Flood's response to them was absolute.
He says, I'm not going. I don't care where it is, I'm not going.
However, due to the combination of Flood's outspokenness and recent decline in performance, Busch felt it was necessary for him to be traded to the Philadelphia Phillies, a struggling ball club. Curt Flood was deeply angered by this trade not only because of his long successful career in St. Louis, but also because he had many business endeavors in the St. Louis area during his 12-year career with the Cardinals. Bush used the power of the reserve clause, which gave team owners total control over a player's athletic career, to enforce this trade. The MLB Players Association, along with Curt Flood, despised this clause, and many in the past have tried to change it. Flood and his lawyer fought this clause by saying it represented involuntary servitude and was therefore unconstitutional. Initially, they sent a letter to Bowie Kuhn, the MLB commissioner, demanding an end to the reserve clause. Kuhn denied this request, and consequently Flood sued him and the MLB under the allegation that the reserve clause violated federal antitrust laws. In Flood's eyes, the players had limited rights and freedoms. He still sued, even with the knowledge that this may mark the end of his professional career. He lost, and then appealed to the Supreme Court, where he was again defeated in a 5-3 decision. The Supreme Court's rulings stemmed from a previous decision in 1922, where they deemed that the antitrust laws did not apply to baseball, because baseball games were local affairs, not interstate commerce. Civil rights and racial prejudice influenced Flood's views on the reserve clause. While fighting for the reserve clause, the civil rights movement was occurring. This gave him the inspiration to fight for freedom and equality in baseball. In fact, many white players were given higher salaries than African Americans, regardless of skill. He voiced these views in his memoir entitled The Way It Is, through actual experiences. His vision of baseball enlightened many others to carry out what he had started. This was epitomized with the Cites decision in 1975, which essentially nullified the reserve clause after MLB pitchers played on a team for 1 year without a contract. After many debates and arguments, it was decided that the players could only be admitted into the free agency after 6 years in the majors. This was one critical step towards the free agency that we have today, and although free agency was achieved, players' rights were still a major issue. Shortly after Curt Flood's death, these issues were addressed with the Curt Flood Act, signed by William J. Clinton in October of 1998. This act partially repealed the antitrust exemption, previously instated by the Supreme Court. It also provided the same rights to the Players Association as those already granted to similar unions in other professional sports leagues such as the NBA and NFL. Without this act, owners could ignore players' rights without legal chastisement. But with the act, these owners cannot break the Collective Bargaining Agreement, or CBA, which is an agreement between the MLB and the MLB Players Association defining the rules of employment and the financial structure of the game. However, this act did not cover minor league players, so the reserve clause still applied. This is why gaining skilled minor league players is so crucial to MLB teams. Curt Flood's actions forever changed baseball because players can now auction themselves to the team that they preferred instead of being traded. This directly affected players' salaries because teams were now able to bid for a prospective player. The immense increase in the average player's salary after the enactment of free agency and the influence of Curt Flood can be seen in this graph created by Business Insider, which depicts the increase of the average player's salary from 1970 to 2010. Baseball salaries are so immense that the top 11 salaries for athletes in America are baseball players. Baseball superstars such as Alex Rodriguez, Albert Pujols, and Derek Jeter all make a salary greater than $18 million per year, not including sponsorships. These salaries were never dreamed of in the past and could not have been attained had Curt Flood not fought for players' rights. Curt Flood's actions not only affected baseball, but also touched upon issues in other major sports leagues like the NFL. From 1989 to 1993, NFL players fought for free agency and were triumphant in doing so. Their movement was directly influenced by Curt Flood's actions and memoir, which recounted Flood's struggles and views. Also, the recent NBA lockout can be seen as a negative effect of Curt Flood's revolutionary changes to players' rights. In this lockout, the NBA Players Association fought with team owners for higher salaries, which were already at ridiculous levels. Disagreements between the two led to a short lockout, with both sides almost refusing to compromise, agitating many NBA fans. Curt Flood's actions were revolutionary because they completely changed the face of American sports. Through Curt Flood, athletes were given a plethora of rights never seen before. These rights protected players and allowed them to negotiate their contracts, allowing for higher pay and increased choice. Without Curt Flood, modern American athletes would be subservient to team owners.